What if I told you that the loudest person in the room is almost never the most powerful? That the real game changer in 2025 isn't noise, it's silence. While everyone else is broadcasting their every move, the ones who truly win are building in the dark, mastering themselves, and letting their results scream what words never could. This year, the smartest strategy isn't to post more or talk bigger. It's to grind quietly and shock the world with what you've built when no one was watching. There's a fundamental shift that happens when you begin to realize that the most powerful work you'll ever do is the work that happens when no one's watching. The human brain is wired for reward, yes, but not all rewards are created equal. There are two types of dopamine responses, one that comes from external validation and one that comes from internal progress. The former is fleeting. It's the quick dopamine spike when someone likes your post, claps for your announcement, or praises your effort. But the latter, that internal sense of reward from knowing you executed with discipline, that's the kind of reward that sustains long-term change. When you make a habit of working in silence, you stop feeding your brain with cheap validation. And what that does is create a feedback loop that's far more powerful. Instead of doing something to get a reaction, you start doing it because it's who you are. The repetition itself becomes satisfying. That's when you've won. Not because the world is clapping for you, but because you're generating your own momentum. One of the biggest obstacles to consistency today is the need to be seen doing the work. But what's often misunderstood is that this constant sharing or performing isn't neutral. It's actually draining cognitive energy. Every time you switch from doing the work to sharing the work, you're forcing your brain to split focus. And focus is not something we have an unlimited supply of. It's a finite resource. When we squander it, we lose access to the deep states of attention that are required to truly build something great. Now, if you look at people who are truly high, performing over the long haul, you'll notice a common trait. They don't announce every move. They don't explain what they're building. They show you when it's built. That's not secrecy, that's strategy, because they understand that the brain operates best when the reward comes from the process, not the perception. And that's the key. When you train yourself to find satisfaction in the process itself, you're no longer a slave to whether the world notices. You've insulated your progress from distraction. In silence, there's clarity. You're not performing, you're practicing. You're rewiring your neural circuitry to be less reactive, more deliberate. And over time, that creates something incredibly rare, an individual who's not only consistent, but calm and internally motivated. That's how you compound effort. That's how you turn a year of quiet work into results so loud, they can't be ignored. Because if you truly want to own 2025, stop trying to be noticed. Start trying to be consistent. Let the silence do the heavy lifting. One of the greatest cognitive advantages you can give yourself in 2025 is the discipline to protect your energy. That doesn't just mean physical stamina. It means mental clarity. Every day, you're faced with 1,000 tiny decisions, distractions, conversations, and obligations that seem harmless on their own, but together, they create noise. And if you're not intentional about filtering that noise, your brain can't prioritize what truly matters. What happens then? You become reactive. You start responding to life instead of designing it. This is where selective focus becomes a superpower. Not everything deserves your time. Not every invitation is an opportunity. Not every conversation deserves a response. The most successful people I've worked with, whether in science, athletics, or business, aren't just good at what they do. They're exceptional at what they don't do. They've mastered the ability to say no, not out of arrogance, but out of precision. They understand the cost of cognitive load and how quickly it can derail your momentum if you're not conscious of it. Think about how often you allow a random comment, an unimportant message, or a low-priority task to hijack your mental space. And the danger isn't just the time it takes, it's the residue your brain holds onto unresolved thoughts. When your attention is scattered, your brain is constantly shifting contexts, which reduces your ability to enter deep work. That's not just an inconvenience. That's a performance limiter. You cannot do high-level thinking in a low-quality mental environment. To protect your energy, you have to build internal boundaries. That means identifying your cognitive peak hours, those windows of the day when you're most alert and mentally sharp, and defending them like your future depends on it. Because it does. It's in those windows that your best work is possible. Don't let those hours get chewed up by obligations that could be delayed, delegated, or deleted altogether. And beyond time, you need to consider people. There are individuals who add to your energy and those who drain it. Your nervous system can feel the difference. You may not always be able to avoid draining people entirely, but you can absolutely control how much access they have to your focus and your attention. That's not being cold. That's being neurologically intelligent. As you move forward into this year, ask yourself, what am I protecting? Am I optimizing for short-term comfort or long-term clarity? Because one gives you instant relief and the other gives you real results. When you start honoring your energy, your time becomes more than a schedule. It becomes a signal to your brain that your goals matter. If you want to build something meaningful, protect the mental fuel it takes to do it. There's something deeply powerful about letting your actions speak louder than your announcements. We live in a time where it's tempting to showcase everything, every plan, every grind, every little win. But what most people don't realize is that when you broadcast your moves before you execute them, you risk weakening the drive behind them. The dopamine hit you get from talking about your goals can make your brain feel like you've already accomplished something, when in reality, nothing has actually changed. You've just relieved the pressure to perform, and with it, the urgency to act. This is why working in silence isn't just about humility. It's about psychological strategy. The real transformation, the kind that sustains progress, doesn't happen when you're constantly seeking validation. It happens in solitude, in the discipline of daily work that no one claps for. When your motivation doesn't rely on being seen, but on seeing yourself improve, you gain a kind of resilience most people never tap into. Because it's not external recognition that builds momentum. It's internal consistency. It's easy to start. Starting feels good. You get the surge of motivation. You write down the goals. You talk about your plans to people who nod and smile and say, "That's amazing." But what's hard is to continue when no one's watching, when there's no applause, and when the results are so small that only you can notice them. That's where true growth happens. In the unseen reps, in the private grind, in the lonely hours that shape future outcomes. When you choose to work in silence, you're not hiding. You're protecting. You're preserving the most sacred part of the process, momentum, without distraction. You're building a foundation strong enough to hold the weight of success before it shows up. And the more you do this, the more control you reclaim over your own process. You're not reacting to what others think. You're not bending to what others expect. You're driving your own development, and that is where confidence is born. People often ask, how do I stay confident when no one sees the effort? The answer is, you stop needing them to see it. You replace the craving for attention with a commitment to mastery. The moment your self-worth becomes independent of recognition is the moment you become unstoppable. Because now, your standard comes from within. And when your standards are internal, they're unshakable. External feedback may fluctuate, but your discipline, that's yours. That's the one variable you control completely. So if you want to build something in 2025 that lasts, something that's strong, focused, and truly yours, don't rush to share every step. Hold it close. Let the results announce you. Let the consistency prove you. And when people finally notice, let it be because your work made it impossible not to. One of the most overlooked factors in long-term success is the environment we place ourselves in. Not just the physical space, though that matters, but the people, the energy, the information, and the emotional climate we allow ourselves to be immersed in. Because the truth is, even if you have a strong mindset and sharp discipline, the wrong environment will slowly chip away at that edge. You don't always notice it happening. It doesn't announce itself. It just gradually dulls your drive, distracts your focus, and normalizes behaviors that move you further from who you're trying to become. If you're working hard in silence this year, you have to become even more protective of your environment. Because that silence is sacred. It's not emptiness. It's a container you're building for growth, clarity, and momentum. And if you let the wrong influences fill that space, constant negativity, drama, people who belittle your ambition or make subtle jabs at your progress, you're not just tolerating noise, you're allowing interference. And even low-level interference, over time, can derail high-level goals. Now, it doesn't mean you need to isolate yourself or cut off everyone, but you do need to audit what you allow in. Think of your attention as currency. Think of your focus as a limited resource. Every distraction you entertain, every unnecessary conversation you dwell in, every toxic dynamic you put energy into, it all adds up. And at some point, you have to decide what you're investing that energy in. Because if you're trying to build something meaningful in silence, you need clarity. You need stability. You need people around you who might not see the full picture of what you're doing, but who respect that you're doing it, There's also something critical about emotional regulation in this context. When you're in an environment that constantly pulls at your emotions, frustration, comparison, anxiety, you start making decisions based on stress rather than strategy. You shift into a reactive mode. But when your space supports calm, focus, and recovery, you create the mental capacity to make better choices. You create conditions where your nervous system isn't always on edge. That's not just about feeling better, it's about performing better. High performers are not just skilled, they're regulated. They manage what they expose themselves to because they understand how much it influences their cognitive output and emotional endurance. So as you pursue your path quietly this year, think about what you're allowing into your world. What voices are you hearing daily? What energy are you around? What inputs are shaping your inner world? Because the process you're committed to deserves to be supported, not sabotaged. And sometimes the most powerful step you can take isn't to push harder, it's to remove what doesn't belong. Clear the space and watch your progress accelerate. When you commit to working hard in silence, one of the most powerful tools you have isn't just your discipline. It's your ability to delay recognition. We live in a world that is addicted to external validation. Likes, praise, status updates, public acknowledgement, they've become the default reward system. But if you truly want to transform, if you want to build something that's resilient, something that lasts, you have to rewire that reward system. You have to learn to fall in love with the work itself, not the applause that may or may not come after. Here's why this matters. When you rely on recognition to stay motivated, you give away control. You place your effort in the hands of others, their attention, their approval, their opinions. But when your reward becomes internal, when you begin to value the quiet progress, the micro wins, the deep satisfaction of knowing you stayed consistent, you become untouchable. Because now your motivation isn't at the mercy of the outside world. It's self-generated. And that's where real power comes from. There's actually a very strong biological component to this. The brain releases dopamine not just when you achieve a goal, but when you anticipate one. So if you can learn to associate dopamine not with the finish line, but with the process, the early mornings, the late nights, the steady repetition, you're training your nervous system to find reward in effort. That's not just psychology. That's neurobiology. It's rewiring your brain to crave discipline, not distraction. What's fascinating is that people who become addicted to recognition start needing more and more of it to feel fulfilled. It's a diminishing return, but those who learn to anchor their sense of worth in how they show up daily, not how others respond, gain a deeper form of confidence. One that's immune to fluctuations. One that isn't rattled when things go unnoticed. Because they understand that just because no one claps today doesn't mean the work doesn't matter. In fact, most breakthroughs happen in the absence of noise. When no one is watching, when it's just you, your goal, and your standard. This is why working in silence isn't just a tactical move, it's a psychological one. It trains you to be self-accountable, to not chase credit, but pursue mastery, to delay the dopamine hit of being seen in favor of the deeper fulfillment that comes from knowing you are doing the hard things for the right reasons. That kind of mindset builds not just success, but durability. Because when everyone else burns out chasing validation, you're still moving, you're still building, you're still focused. So train your brain to love the silence. Train it to see the unseen work as the highest form of progress. Because that's where transformation happens. When no one's clapping and you keep going anyway. One of the most underestimated traits in those who truly achieve something extraordinary is their ability to let results speak for themselves. In a world that encourages you to announce every move, every plan, every minor achievement, there's a rare kind of strength in staying silent until there's something undeniable to show. That strength doesn't just build discipline. It commands respect. And the reason is simple. When your results do the talking, there's no argument. There's no room for opinions or doubts. There's only the evidence of your action. People are quick to speak because silence feels like invisibility. It feels like falling behind. But here's the truth. Silence, when paired with focused work, is one of the most powerful strategies you can have. It's not about hiding. It's about not wasting energy explaining yourself. It's about conserving the fire and pouring it into the execution, not the performance. You don't need to convince people of your vision. You need to show them. And by the time they realize what you've built, it will be too late to stop it. There's something inherently intimidating about a person who doesn't brag, doesn't boast, doesn't need to sell themselves, but consistently delivers. That kind of person gains power not through noise, but through certainty. Quiet consistency is magnetic. It draws people in because it's so rare. Most chase quick recognition. Few have the patience to let their work compound silently until it demands attention. You also develop an inner calm when you don't feel the need to constantly update the world. You stop seeking permission or validation. You stop rushing. And what replaces it is focus. Clean, undistracted focus. That's where high-level performance lives. In the quiet space where your only competition is the version of you that wasn't disciplined enough yesterday. You train yourself to be outcome-driven, not approval-driven. Because ultimately, people can argue with opinions, but they can't argue with results. Let others underestimate you. Let them assume. Let them talk. While they do, build. While they waste time performing, train, refine, create. The ones who move quietly often move the farthest. Because they're not swayed by the noise, they're anchored by purpose. And purpose, when protected by silence, becomes a force with momentum behind it. At the end of the day, it's not the loudest person in the room who wins. It's the one who prepared while everyone else was performing. Let your actions build your reputation. Let your work carve the path. Let your results speak the language no one can ignore. So here's what it all comes down to. This year, you don't need to shout louder, prove more, or explain yourself to anyone. You need to focus, simplify, and work in silence. Let your discipline be your voice. Let your progress do the talking. Let your consistency make the noise for you. The world doesn't need to see the process. They'll see the results. And when they do, they won't question how. You'll already be too far ahead to catch.